Hello, 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 and welcome to Kindred Skulls. Who's that voice you hear? That's right, it's your boy Gregg Blake, my first regular season appearance. For those of you who are new to the show, hello, how you doing? My name's Greg. I'm joined this lovely afternoon with my friend and co-host Matt Freese. How are you this evening, Matt?
I'm doing excellent, Greg. Yeah, we get you about once a quarter, I think. So that's a
That's about how much energy I have to apply to this team at the moment. No,
well,
it's just been a scheduling thing. But go ahead.
yeah. I was just gonna say you've showed up about as many times as the Vikings have this year so far. So
That's true. That's true. So we got a great show for you here today. We're gonna go over the Chiefs loss, what went right, what went wrong. Talk a little bit about some breaking news from the last couple of days. That's my dog squeaking his ball. I apologize. We're also going to be talking about the preview of the Bears game coming up. So just going to go over that really briefly and have a good time here. Matt, it
yes,
was a game of ups, a game of downs. Did you ever feel like we were really in this one?
I think I did for a little while, especially the time frame where Kelsey got hurt a little bit, which I'm glad that he was able to come back in the game from a seeing good players perspective. Like, you never like to see players get injured. Obviously JJ getting injured in this game sucks quite a bit, but Kelsey getting injured, the Vikings were up, I think, at that point 13-10, and then the Chiefs, of course, have to go and ruin it almost immediately with that ridiculous Patrick Mahomes throw to Justin Watson that was just like barely a catch, right? Like, his feet are lifting off the ground as the ball is in his hand, and you're like, is it a catch? Is it not a catch? I think it was probably a good call stands in that scenario. Like, clearly the one foot that was dragging was still dragging, and the foot that was lifting off the ground was enough on the ground for me to allow that to be a catch. And it's like, oh right, we're playing Patrick Mahomes. Like,
Yeah. That's one of those things. There was all this like lead up to this game, um, eh, where I think some of us were. I don't know why this keeps happening. It's like the last few years now. The Chiefs start out a little slow. Obviously the last couple of years they've lost weapons or whatever. Everyone just forgets about them, or intentionally kind of like it's like we're waiting for the end. I've got something to tell you, folks. The end ain't coming anytime soon. As long as that guy is playing for them, they're in every game. That's just the way it's going to be. And it definitely felt like we maybe, as a fan base, we weren't totally respecting that. That's how it felt to me, at least leading up to the game. There was a lot of like, oh, the Chiefs are beatable, which I guess they kind of were, right? Like we were in this technically, right? How
yeah,
do you?
we were in it, and I think, in this game, I never expected to beat the Chiefs in the first place. I mean, I think you can go back to last week's episode, and Nick and I probably say as much on the Chiefs, but the Vikings aren't that uncompetitive of a football team, right? They're a 1-4 team, but they've been competitive in every single game against all of their opponents. They just have frustrating issues, and I think we saw a continuation of those issues in this game, right? Like, the inability to get the play call in, the
Yeah.
and then the delay a game before the fourth down because they were unable to get the play call in prior to that fourth down as well, right? Like, that sort of procedural stuff. The fumble on the first snap of the game when all they've been preaching for the past, I don't know, 4 weeks has been, hey, we got to stop fumbling the football. Yet it seems like every single player on this offense needs to take his turn with the fumble. Maybe then finally we'll exercise the curse. I don't even know who hasn't fumbled yet. That's how many players have fumbled. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
has Addison
it
fumbled?
almost
Has
feels
KJ
like
fumbled? I don't know, but
it
probably.
almost feels like it is planned, like it is scripted. It was so ridiculous when Oliver fumbled. I was just like, are you what? Like
Yeah.
how much did they talk about that this week? And you brought up the situations, game situations, and Arif Hassan had a really good write up on this week on his Substack, wide left if you're interested. Um, he talked about situations and how last year situational football was this team's basically greatest strength. And it
Yeah.
was one of the things that you would point to and say, no matter what's happening with this team, no matter how bad our defense is, no matter how crazy these games are, the team is executing in crucial moments. And it's like completely flipped this year. And it, like to a bizarre degree. Like have you been able to isolate? Obviously, as fans, we don't really have like we're not on the sidelines. We don't know. Maybe someone's headphone went out, or
Hmm.
like we cannot know, and they're never going to go up in the press box and be like, yeah, the quarterback fucked it up or whatever. They're never going to do that. So it's very hard to like get a clear picture of what happens all the time in a game. Have you seen anything like watching tape that indicates to you like maybe this is the issue with situational football?
Well, I mean, so just from seeing the games, because I don't think this is really much that you see on tape in particular, right? Because you don't see the huddle process on tape, which you'll occasionally see during the games. And it's like
Right,
the play a couple weeks ago against the Chargers where they struggled to get it off quickly, that turned into the interception. The timeout, the first timeout for sure that they tried to take, I don't remember the second timeout. It seems like Kirk can't hear the play from Kevin O'Connell, right? And after
right.
literally the first time that happened in the Chargers game, and they got the playoff, whatever, but it was probably about 5 seconds later than it
Kirk
should
does
have
that
been.
thing where
Yeah,
his face is all scrunched up. He's like,
try. I'm like,
looks like he's
like they should have just had a process where, hey, Kirk, as soon as you can't get what I'm saying, call a play. You know what you're
called.
doing with this offense, run the offense. And that's the frustrating part for me is like they're still waiting to try to get that in, and then nobody's aligned, nobody gets lined up. The other frustrating part is on offense, it's like the exact same cast of characters, right? It's not like anybody freaking changed from the coaching staff to the roster on the offensive side of the ball, right?
Right,
Like Austin Schlottman, I guess, had to play for a couple weeks at center, right? He was on the team last year. It's not like he wasn't included in all this stuff last year. The only
right,
two new faces who have seen significant snaps on offense are Josh Oliver and Jordan Addison, and they're not the ones who are the problem with play calling issues, like getting the play delivered to the team.
right.
So it's really just baffling to me how we could have been so good in this and so good in 2 minute situations last year as well. This team has been an abject disaster in terms of wasting time in 2 minute decisions by getting tackled in bounds, by not clocking the ball or not getting timeouts or just not getting up to the line fast enough. Like,
And it's also it's like it's not like it's just happened once
no,
and we're being big babies about it. It's pretty consistent, and
it's
we're
like
talking
every
end of
single
half.
game
Yeah,
at the
and it's
end of the
not just end
half.
of games; it's end of halves.
Yeah.
It's very strange looking, and it's hard to figure out exactly what's happening there.
Yeah.
And
And
I
it's
would
like,
I would kind of bundle that whole mess in with just a theme of this game, which is kind of missing opportunities. So, was there other stuff that jumped out to you that you were like, because I can think of a couple that okay, the game kind of changed there, not getting the score there or not,
yeah.
whatever.
So I think on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, the drops are the number one thing, right? There's a bunch of high profile drops in this game. I believe PFF charted the Vikings with 6 drops, which would have been the highest this season if the Ravens didn't have 7 drops. And I don't know if you've seen any of the videos coming out of the Ravens game, but that was an abject disaster. Like Lamar was like perfect and he's making all of these throws and the receivers can't catch anything. And of course they end up losing that game to the Steelers after like just dominating them for 4 quarters.
Right.
Um, so the drops were huge. We had 6 drops. I've heard people say in regards to the Ravens who had 7 drops that only 4 other teams have had 7 drops, right? So that means the Vikings are like tied for the sixth most amount of drops in the last 10 years or something like that in a single game from this game. I think that's the biggest missed opportunity for me. If you
AJ
look,
had a drop. He
yeah,
never drops the ball. Just a crazy game.
yeah, and oh yeah, and that was a rough drop too because he was open over the middle, and then also I think if Kirk holds onto the ball a tick longer, which he should have thrown that ball to JJ. Like I'm not saying Kirk missed a read or whatever, but if he holds onto the ball for a tick longer, that safety was gonna nail down on JJ, and Jordan Addison is open for a touchdown on the post. because he beats single coverage. So it's like, it's just one of those things where a clear first down 10-yard play, a potential touchdown maybe if you like if Kirk kind of loses his mind a little bit, because I wouldn't recommend that Kirk does it. You get absolutely nothing off of, which is kind
Nothing.
of brutal.
Zero.
The other thing from a missed opportunities perspective on offense is, I honestly, I don't think they missed a ton outside of the drops. Like, they only had 7 possessions. They scored, I'm sorry, they only had 8 possessions. They scored on 4 of them. And then the 2 were the last 2 drives of the game where they had to go for it on 4th and 12, right? They would have scored points in a normal situation there. And then, they ran out of time at the very end of the game. So they did a pretty good job of moving the ball in general on the Chiefs defense in this game, I would say, right? They were getting into scoring range on a consistent basis. The other missed opportunities I would say were on the defensive side of the ball, where the Chiefs had so many plays that were just barely catches on the other end, right? Like, the Chiefs are making these great contested catches. The one where Cam Bynum, like, I guarantee you he thought he had an interception on that play, and the Chiefs receiver just mosses him a little bit, right? I think there was another situation where maybe it was Bynum, or it was like Mekhi Blackman or somebody who got mossed on a play. The Justin Watson one that I mentioned earlier, the toe tap on the sideline, the Travis Kelce, not interception on the catch where he's going to the ground. Like, all of those just going the Chiefs' way, and then the ones on the Viking side with the drops and stuff not going their way really feel like the difference in this game, and that's the total missed opportunities to me.
Absolutely, on both sides of the ball, and that's how you're going to lose against a team like the Chiefs. That's for sure. That and turning the ball over on the first drive of the game.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing. I mean, that's what it has been. That's been thematic for this team so far this year. Still some chances to clean it up, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk about some. We'll get to the big news in a second. All right, we'll cap off this disappointing game recap with the worst news of all, possibly even worse than the loss itself. We'll get there. First, let's talk about some of the positives, and it's
Sure.
mostly on the defensive side of the ball, stuff that you noticed, at least, that you were like, that stood out to you in the game. First, let's talk about the run defense a little bit. What did you see there?
Yeah, so this is kind of an overarching point on the run defense, and there were a couple plays where the Chiefs were successful. Notably, there was a wildcat play that the Chiefs ran, I think, on their first drive to Pacheco that gained like 11 yards, got them down to the 1 yard line. And that was just kind of the way the Vikings were lined up in the formation. They weren't prepared for the additional blocker that running wildcat gives you, right? Because it's the same thing as involving the quarterback in the run game. The Vikings respected probably the outside trickery from the Chiefs a little bit too much, which I can't really blame them, frankly, because the Chiefs love to do some complete nonsense in the red zone where it's like, oh, we got the ball to Patrick Mahomes somehow, and now he's throwing, I don't know, he's doing a backflip while throwing a touchdown, or you know what I mean? Like, they always pull out some wild stuff in the red zone.
Oh,
Um,
ridiculous.
but overall, in the Chiefs game, the Chiefs averaged just over 3 yards per attempt, which is not very good at all. And Krauser on Twitter, at Krauserific on Twitter, put it together where the Vikings run defense for the season, excluding the Eagles game, has allowed only 253 yards on 100 carries. So that's 2.5 yards per carry that they're allowing in the run game on defense. That's really impressive. And I think that really goes... there's a couple things that go into it, and the flip side of the offense, it kind of relates to as well. The Vikings are a very aggressive run defense. They run a lot of single high coverage, middle field closed coverage, which gives them an extra defender in the box. That helps against opposing run games flat out. They also have high quality interior run defenders, and Harrison Phillips and Jonathan Bullard in particular. I don't think Dean Lowry's played great, but the way their Vikings are playing and the number of blitzes that they run help too, right? That's more bodies in the box. That's more bodies attacking the line of scrimmage. That's going to help against the run as long as your assignments sound against the run, right? And aren't leaving huge gaps open when you're attempting these blitzes. So all of those things combined, I think, has really helped to elevate the Vikings run defense. And, credit to guys like Ivan Pace, who's making a big impact, and his ability to take on blocks. We've talked about, Nick and I have talked about it on this show before, but it just shines week after week after week. for a player of his stature to be able to do what he's doing in traffic in the middle of the field is really impressive. Jordan Hicks is a larger, more powerful player, and he's a better run defender, probably than he is a coverage linebacker, but that functions the way the Vikings are playing defense because he's not really being asked to drop into coverage all that much. So, that's what's really impressive about the Vikings run defense. There are plays like the Eagles game was kind of a mindset thing, right? They were playing with super light boxes and they were playing with super light bodies in the box. And the Eagles, who have a giant offensive line, were able to dominate them on that front.
Right.
The Chiefs themselves actually have a really impressive offensive line in terms of blocking. And there were a couple plays where like Creed Humphrey did a great job, right? Creed Humphrey's awesome. He's their center. But for the most part, the Vikings have been able to shut out opposing run games. Literally they have, with the exception of that Eagles game, pretty much entirely shut out all of the run games that they faced. So I've just appreciated that from the Vikings, and it's worth shouting out in the loss.
Absolutely. And it's also worth shouting out, we talked a lot about Flores in the offseason, and he continues to impress each and every week. The stuff he's doing with, I think we can all agree, an undermanned group. Pretty cool. You caught some things this week that kind of stood out to you. You want to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, the Flores blitz stuff is always really impressive and interesting, right? We've covered a lot stuff like Hawk on this show, where you're sending one more guy than the offense can get. The Vikings, I think, were a little bit more creative with their blitzes in this game. They ran a double cap blitz, which is a double corner blitz. It was actually brought up on the broadcast by, I think, by Romo, where he's like, you never see guys run double corner blitzes, and both the Vikings and the Chiefs ran it. That created I think, excuse me, I think Mahomes was trying to go to the flat on that play, and he just skipped one hopped one to Tony on that. So that was that created a negative play for the offense, right? An incompletion is a negative play for the offense. The other thing that was just wild, and Luke posted it on Twitter, and this is something that Flores has done going back to Miami, but it's really crazy to see, is he'll mug all the guys up on the line of scrimmage, and then he'll drop out of that. But he doesn't drop out of it in the way that Zimmer does, where it's just like hook zones underneath, and you still kind of have the deep help individually deep. He dropped out of it into like a complete cover 3 zone. So Josh Metellus is on the line of scrimmage, in the middle of the line of scrimmage, probably in the A gap. I don't remember exactly which gap he's in. And he has to haul it all the way back to the middle of the field on a throw that Mahomes just kind of chucked up against cover 3. And Mahomes underthrew the ball. And it could have been an interception. Like Mekhi Blackman had the ball in his hands and he just ended up dropping it. Another scenario where you see the Vikings, right, just barely miss on something that's a game-changing play, like by the thinnest of margins. So,
That's got to be so nerve-wracking for Metellus to know he's got to get 20 yards downfield to like standing at the line of scrimmage. That's got to be really freaky.
I don't even know if there's time for thought for Metellus in that kind of situation, right? It's just like, all right, I got to get back there. But it's created, I think, a fun defense, right? Like you can see the guys are all hyped up when they make a good play. And it's like everybody's, having a lot of fun running the defense because they get to do wacky stuff like all the time. And, it didn't work out completely against the Chiefs. They moved the ball pretty well. At the same time, I mean, Patrick Mahomes, his numbers 31 of 41. All of the quarterbacks have had a good completion percentage against the Vikings so far this year, but 281 passing yards, right? That's less than 10 yards per completion. I don't know what that is in yards, in terms of yards per attempt, but it's like less, it's almost about 7 yards per attempt, probably. Yeah. Which isn't like elite numbers by any stretch. Right.
Well, for Pat, that's a very pedestrian day.
Right. For Pat, that's a very pedestrian game. So we did kind of hold him in check a little bit. We sacked him twice. The sack. Actually, let me also cover this. This is what I wanted to get to. The Danielle Hunter sack was what's known as a flush stunt. So the Vikings have 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, 5 men across the line of scrimmage. You'll see them play with that front quite a bit, and then they're running a 3-man game to the one side. So they've got a 0 tech, and I think it was, and this was kind of their base defense. So I think they had Lowry, Phillips, Bullard, and Davenport and Hunter all across the line of scrimmage, right? So they have Lowry and I think it was Bullard and Phillips crashed to the left, which is where Hunter's lined up, and Hunter comes back in the middle and comes right up the A gap and goes right to the quarterback. Actually, it was Wanham in the game because Wanham actually kind of beat the left tackle on this play and might have had a sack in his own right if if Hunter hadn't gotten there first. So it's just a really nice way to clear out the middle of the field, and Hunter has the athleticism to completely blow past any sort of blocker coming back when they time it right on this.
Hmm.
So it's just a nice play to get that sack. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the fact that that each week we're able to find so many positives now on both sides of the ball, which is a stark difference from last year. I don't know if that makes these losses more painful or less. It's almost like I, it's almost like would it be better just to know you suck like for sure, like the Broncos? I think ultimately it's better to compete, but it is a kind of a head scratcher. Speaking of competing, go ahead. Sorry, Matt.
I was gonna say, I think it's way more fun to compete. Like if these games were
Yeah,
complete laughers where we're getting blown out 70-20, like I don't even want to turn on that tape, right?
yeah,
Because I know nothing good is showing up on the defensive side of the ball,
there's
right?
nothing to. Yeah,
Like every single thing that's going on there is going to be bad on defense. So
yeah,
at least we get to see exciting players. We've seen players step up on the defensive side of the ball, right? Like Ivan Pace is the number one example. I think Cam Bynum's played great. I think
yeah.
I like what Byron Murphy's done. Obviously Hunter's awesome, but I like what I've seen from Marcus Davenport in the two games as well. Right, there are missing pieces on this team. Right, there's nobody who can rush on the interior. I like Harrison Phillips, and I've liked what Jonathan Bullard has done a lot from a run defense perspective, but they just can't push the pocket and get to the quarterback. Um, so the positive thing is I think there are a couple building blocks to move forward. And Josh Metellus, right, somebody who'd never really played significant snaps before, is playing a significant role and playing admirably. Like I don't think he's playing at a super high level, but he has a clearly defined role, and I think he's executed it very well so far this season. So seeing all those guys who are potential building blocks moving forward, I think is way more exciting than just being like, I don't know what I can do with any of these players, which is kind of a situation where we were at last year, right? Where it's like, okay, we have these vets who we know are good, right? But the whole outside of that, like we don't have anybody who I can trust. So,
Speaking of building blocks, you
yes.
see how I did that, Matt? I stuck the landing twice on this transition.
Transition king.
Speaking of building blocks, our biggest, most important building block, heartbeat of the team, Justin Jefferson goes down with the hamstring injury in the late third quarter. I think it was late third.
Yeah, it was
Um,
sometime around then.
yeah, and didn't look good at the time, and only got worse as the news sort of slowly bled out this week. Tipping this on a Wednesday. What a bummer, man.
Yeah, man.
Justin Jefferson's on IR. We're going to miss him for at least 4 weeks. There's not a lot of details in terms of, what grade strain it was, whether he, tore anything. We don't really have any details at all, which always feels a little like I feel like usually teams want to get out in front of things when it's not that serious. So kind of makes me nervous. What's your reaction, man? I mean, obviously, I don't think there's going to be any surprises here. We're both super bummed.
Yeah, so I one of the things that's very frustrating, right, is this kind of seems like another organizational miscue overall to me because one of the issues that I think caused both the Kelsey and the Jefferson injuries, their non-contact injuries, is them slipping on the turf at the
That's right.
stadium. And there's a
Yeah.
report that came out, maybe it was during the game or after the game, that the Vikings have some sort of slotted turf. I don't really know too much about field conditions, so I'm speaking from a place of ignorance. But my understanding is the turf that the Vikings have is one that the NFLPA absolutely hates and wants to see eliminated from the game. The NFLPA wants to see all turf eliminated from the game and really go to to grasp just because of the injury rate thing, but the turf the Vikings have specifically is like one of the worst in terms of injury rates for players on it. I mean, we saw Mike Williams, tear his ACL on this turf, 2 weeks
Dalvin
ago
Cook
as
tore his
well.
ACL
Yeah,
year one.
so
This is big. So
I
yeah, that's
mean,
definitely
it's
yeah.
uh, it's caused player injuries, and the turf's slated to be replaced at the end of last year. It's like, well, why didn't we identify this as an issue earlier, right? Like, why are the Vikings one of 6 teams that have this turf, I think, behind the curve on this, right? We invest so much into these facilities and so much into, we have the #1 rating in the NFLPA for the players, for all the facilities and all that stuff. We've invested all that money and we can't get the playing surface that they play on, right? Like, that's definitely a frustrating organizational part. But for Justin Jefferson, like, okay, so on one hand, I think that him going on IR is a good thing a little bit for him in particular, because he is the type of player who is absolutely going to push his way onto the field any way possible, right?
Hmm.
He's the type of competitor that if he can get the medical staff to clear him, he's going to try to do it, right? He's going to be the Russell Wilson playing with a high ankle sprain when it's like, oh, this should be a 4-week injury, right? And it's
Right.
like, yeah, or trying to play through that stupid finger thing he had, and then he was terrible trying to throw the ball with a broken finger, right? So JJ's going to,
Almost like protecting him from himself
yeah.
is
So
kind of what.
I
Yeah.
feel like in putting him in IR, we're protecting him from himself a little bit, which long term, I want the best thing for Justin Jefferson, right? Like, and the Vikings need to do the best thing for Justin Jefferson, because they want to have him, they should want to have him on the team for as long as he's playing in the NFL, right? Like, I don't think there's a question about that. So I think we need to do the best thing for Justin Jefferson, and being in a position where you can say to him, no, you literally can't go on the field today. Like, we need to work on these rehab things. And the Vikings training staff in general has been very good with player injuries so far through 2 years, and getting players back from injuries kind of healthy, right? Like, I don't know if there have been any statistics on it, but I don't think there's really been a significant re-aggravation of injuries from Vikings players coming back.
That's
So,
definitely my impression as well. It's one of those things. It's one of those small things that you take for granted until you don't have it. We've had years or stretches, eras or whatever, where our training staff hasn't been great. I mean, I don't know if you
yep.
remember all the pectoral tears and
Right.
just crazy.
The end of the
So that's
Sugarman era, we
yeah,
had massive injuries both in 2020 and 2021, right? And then we were one of the least injured teams in the NFL last year, with I think it's Taylor, or is it Tyler Williams, our uh, head of
we should
performance,
know this
basically.
because he's been doing a great job. So let's make
Yeah.
that our mission next week. We'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll shout him out.
I can look it up right here in a second.
Yeah,
But
all right. While,
no,
while you're looking it up,
we do a great job of
you talk.
getting guys back from injury. I got it here. Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just gonna say, just to kind of cap this off, and I don't know if you want to even go here, but um, you know, JJ going on IR, especially this particular the timing of it, um, it's causing a bit of a tizzy. The Vikings blogosphere or whatever you want to call it is up in arms about what does this mean for our season, and I think we can all agree it's very bad for our season. But I wanted to ask you, and do you have his name before we move on here?
Yeah, it is Tyler Williams, Vice President of Player Health and Performance.
Tyler, shout out to Tyler Williams. You're awesome. I'm going to remember your name now. Um, do we even want to talk about all this trade stuff, Matt? Because to me, it feels like
I don't really
it's
want to. Like,
completely yeah.
another person I'm mad at is Adam Schefter, who just seems to want to stoke the flames of, like, first of all, every national media talking head, all I saw yesterday was them like, oh, Kirk Cousins has to be traded now. Like, the Vikings have to trade Kirk Cousins. Like, they're going to tank. That's what they do for the season. Also, we want Danielle Hunter, which
I know. We don't even
man,
have to go there. This is why I didn't
I
want to
get
bring it up.
I get
Because it's not
so triggered
substantive.
when somebody mentions the Vikings trading Danielle Hunter. Anyway,
It's
the other
not
thing
substantive, though.
is you
That's what
have
bothers me.
Adam Schefter stirring the pot, being like, oh, Justin Jefferson, he may sit out for a little bit longer because he doesn't have that contract. And it's like, come on, guys. The Vikings are going to do right by Justin Jefferson, I think, in this scenario. They have functionally 4 more years of team control, honestly, because you can have him play the rest of this season. Next season, he's on the 5th-year option. You can franchise tag him twice. Like, Justin Jefferson is the caliber of player where theoretically you can do that, and you're not worried about how much you're paying him. So even if they can't come to an agreement on the contract, I mean, which first of all, they need to come to an agreement on the contract. Like, if the Vikings don't sign Justin Jefferson for a market setting amount of money, like, what are you even doing as a franchise? That makes no
Absolutely.
sense.
Yeah.
Um, so
And as far as Cousins and Hunter, and it's all just talk. It's all bluster.
yeah,
Nobody ever has any legitimate trade options for Kirk. First of all, when they have this discussion, it's always like this team, that team. It's like, have you actually looked at whether they have the assets? Whether Kirk would waive his no trade clause? There's no quotes. There's nothing. It's all so
yeah.
pointless right now until something like a shoe actually drops. I feel like it's not worth giving any more breath. But did you have a final thought on
No,
this?
I guess the last thought a lot of it seems to be coming in from outside, like I'll call it national media, right? And I usually, honestly, enjoy listening to national media. I like the perspective that they can have on the team. Like, we're kind of insulated here from a Vikings perspective. All I've heard from national media about the Minnesota Vikings this year is, oh, they're regressing in 1-score games, which is like, come on, like, we know that, we knew, like, it's it's just so obnoxious that that's the only talking point people have about the actual performance of the team on the field, when I think there is some interesting stuff. Or, oh, Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth, well, they're total busts. And it's like, well, a couple of our draft picks, Caleb Evans and Cam Bynum, are playing above them, but they weren't first round draft picks, so you guys won't talk about them. Or now trade Kirk Cousins. And we just need to be better than that as to fans of teams, as a, like, I don't know, I think they should just be better to their audiences, right? And actually talk about the
I would
team
be
seriously.
I would be very fine having this conversation if there was anything realistic about it. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we doing here? You're just speaking into the wind, basically.
All right.
If this, yeah, let's
So now we spent 5 minutes on that conversation. Let's pivot to replacing Justin Jefferson in the Vikings offense, because I think that's a little
yeah.
bit more interesting of a topic.
Yep.
One of the things I've also seen floating out, and it is a correct answer, but it's a misleading answer in my opinion, is that the quote unquote replacement for Justin Jefferson in the Vikings offense is KJ Osborne, right? KJ Osborne is going to play the role that Justin Jefferson played, is the line I've seen from Kevin Seifert. I think it was from who writes for the on the Vikings for ESPN, right? And I think that's true. But I think what is true about it is that KJ Osborne is going to be the Vikings' X receiver, which is what Justin Jefferson was. I don't think that KJ Osborne is suddenly going to be expected to get Justin Jefferson's target share. I also don't think, because the Vikings do a lot of offensive design to get Justin Jefferson open, right? And they kind of need to, right? Because defenses focus on him, but they do a lot, or like Justin Jefferson's their primary read on plays. I don't think KJ Osborne is going to be the primary read on a lot of Vikings plays. I think it's going to be a combination of TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison, right? Like, the Vikings have gone to TJ Hawkinson and designed plays for TJ Hawkinson in critical situations, particularly third downs. We see that quite often, actually. Jordan Addison, the Vikings haven't really designed specific plays for, although they've benefited on a number of plays where defenses have focused on Jefferson, so they've gone to Addison. So that's kind of a dichotomy there. Now, without Jefferson being that way, I think they can call plays that focus on getting Jordan Addison, using the other resources in the offense to get Jordan Addison. Jesus, I can't even say his name. Open, as opposed to
Call him
doing it for
Jordy.
KJ, who
We'll call him Jordy.
I just think Addison has a lot more of a spark than KJ does in this offense. Obviously, KJ's had a few issues this year as well with drops or not being able to to get the ball in contested situations, which has been a little bit of frustrating. There was the interception in the Bucs game, right? There was an end zone play here where Kirk said he threw the ball a little bit too early. If you're a receiver, you really hope that your receiver can get your head around and catch that ball for a touchdown, right? Rather than settling for a field goal. So it's been up and down. Obviously, there's no way to replace one for one the production of a Justin Jefferson. Like, he's just too special for you to, lose him for the offense and have the offense not suffer at all. But I do think that the supporting cast has enough juice in it that the Vikings can still be functional to good as an offense without him in it, from a pass catching perspective.
I will cap this off on my end by saying I appreciate your optimism. And that's the most that I can say.
So it's
Yeah.
it's not like we're going to be the best offense in the NFL, right? And the Vikings were the most explosive offense in the NFL through 5 weeks. Like, we had the highest rate of 20+ yard plays on offense. Well, I take that back. We were the most explosive passing offense because the Dolphins' absolutely absurd rushing offense put them on top, and absurd passing offense, just absurd offense in general, right? Put them on top
Yeah.
of the total list. But the Vikings had the most passing plays, and they were middle of the pack in rushing plays too. Like, it wasn't like they were down at the bottom in terms of explosive rushing plays. But the passing offense is going to suffer for lack of Justin Jefferson, right? The key will be for this offense, and this is something we kind of talked about last year, what the illusion of complexity means, right? Which is something Kevin O'Connell talked about when he came in, which is probably something the previous offenses talked about, honestly, because it's from that Shanahan tree, right? That Kubiak Shanahan tree, Shanahan McVay tree, whatever you want to call it, is you're running a lot of the same plays out of different formations, right? And your formations have an X, a Z, a flanker, which is an F, a Y, and a running back, right? So those are your different players. That F gets interchanged, right? It's a slot receiver, it's a second tight end, it's a fullback in CJ Ham, whatever it is. The Y is TJ Hawkinson. In the Vikings offense, the X was Justin Jefferson, the Z was KJ Osborne, the Jordan Addison became the Z in 3 receiver sets, and KJ Osborne moved over to the F in those scenarios. Now your X is going to be KJ Osborne, your Z is going to be Jordan Addison, and your F is probably going to be Brandon Powell, right? He was the guy who got the most run. Maybe I don't know what Jalen Nailor's health status is. Maybe Jalen Nailor, if they like him a lot when he comes back, if he's healthy. So when you're calling plays, you run out of specific formations that put an X in a spot, so he's running a specific route. Now we're going to put the Z in that spot so the Z runs that route, and Jordan Addison gets open as opposed to KJ Osborne. So that's how I kind of want to describe that. But at the end of the day, like, there's no accounting for the gravity that Justin Jefferson had, right?
Well, we haven't
Because,
seen it. I mean, I think
yeah.
to me, that's the biggest thing is like, he's thankfully been an incredibly healthy player to this point,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully that continues. Please. Uh,
Yeah.
um, we've not seen this team have to go out there and win without him. And so yeah, I think it's going to be a very different viewing experience. But hopefully they come up with some creative ways to, like you said, get people open and try some stuff maybe we haven't tried yet this year. As Bill Simmons calls it, the Patrick Ewing effect. Maybe we have some guys step up. Maybe we learn a little bit more about Jordan Addison. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm a little nervous, but luckily we are facing off against a team that has been at points this season a total punching bag. So if we're gonna have a game where we try to learn and experiment and figure out how to play without Justin Jefferson, this is certainly one of the ones I would have picked, I guess, if I had to put a gun
It
to my
is certainly one of the ones I would have picked, I guess,
head.
is
All right, let's
exactly
talk about them.
it's
The
exactly how you
Chicago.
should feel about losing Justin Jefferson, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
It's like I'm not, I'm not saying this is good news. Let's talk about the Chicago Bears a little bit. Don't don't really know what the hell's going on in Chicago, right? I mean, they start the season looking absolutely horrid. Total meltdowns in the locker room, guys asking out, Fields is calling out his coach and pressers. It looks like it's implosion city. And then not even, 48 hours after that, they're putting up a bunch of points and they lose kind of a squeaker. And then they put up a bunch of points again, and win their first game last week. And now we're getting them on a very long rest. So it's kind of hard to know, like, are the Chicago Bears the hapless mess that started the year, or are they, you know, the team that can put up 40 points on you? I don't know. I don't know. Let's talk about it a little bit, and let's start with the most pivotal player on their team, the most important player, obviously, where they will go where he goes this year, Justin Fields. Um, some might call the last couple of weeks a resurgence. I find it very annoying that he was one of my talking points in the offseason. I said Justin Fields hasn't forgotten how to throw a football, and he immediately played about as poorly as humanly possible just to make me look bad. Uh, but he looks like he maybe found a little bit of juice recently. What do you think? Is this real?
So I have to say, I didn't watch anything on the Bears' last two games.
Why would you?
I was watching religiously JT O'Sullivan at the QB school or at QB school on Twitter. He has a great YouTube series called the QB School where he covers quarterbacks, and he honestly puts out a ridiculous amount of content. Like, I don't understand how he goes through and does videos on the number of games a week that he does, because he's hitting like 30 plus minute videos on 10 quarterbacks a week, and then he does hour plus long videos for the Patreon stuff, which I'm subscribed to. So JT went through and he does full videos basically on the Bears' first three games, and it's just an abject disaster. Now, like I said, I haven't had the opportunity to watch the last 2 weeks, so I'm kind of interested to see how it's gotten better. But it's literally everything from play design to the personnel on the field not executing at all to Justin Fields looking like garbage. Honestly, like, that's what he was the first few weeks. He was hesitant. He wasn't throwing throws that he should. Every ball that came out of his hand was wobbly. Like, it was crazy how wobbly those balls that were coming out of his hand. And that's not something I remember from Justin Fields. Like, I don't know what was up
Yeah.
with him, but something clearly wasn't right with how he was seeing and feeling about the game. Right.
Yeah.
And then they got rid of Chase Claypool and everything fixed itself. So obviously that was the problem. Uh, no, it
I
all
think you finally win this. Okay, I'm conceding victory to you. Chase
it,
Claypool is bad. Okay,
yeah, no,
there.
in all seriousness, without me poking Greg here anymore, I think part of it is playing bad defenses helped him out, right? Like, the Denver Broncos are the worst defense in the NFL. Like, they had the worst DVOA through 4 weeks, I think, in NFL history. I mean, part of that was getting absolutely freaking demolished by the Dolphins,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, like, they just were not a good defense at all. So that helps the Bears out a little bit. And they ended up kind of falling apart right at the end of that game. I think Fields had a fumble that was very pivotal and they couldn't put everything together. Then they go up against Washington and completely decimate them. I think the main thing that beat Washington was DJ Moore, right? Like, the Bears have one quality skill position player, and that's DJ Moore. I think everybody else you can kind of forget about. Darnell Mooney was an interesting deep threat for a minute, but he's not any good. 85, as JT likes to call him, Cole Kmet, is just not athletic as a tight end. Like, going from watching, and people are kind of frustrated with TJ Hawkinson, right, because of the drops, and I think rightfully so with the drops. Like, TJ Hawkinson has not played up to the standard, and he's had high profile losses that have cost the Vikings games. But TJ Hawkinson's ability to explode off the line of scrimmage and, like, create separation as a tight end is really impressive, and is like, it's night and day compared to what Cole Kmet can do as a runner, right? Cole Kmet is just slow as molasses out there. Like, it's not particularly effective. Nobody on their offensive line really is any good. They're constantly making mistakes in pass protection, so that's not great. just in general, the Bears offense was a train wreck through the first 3 weeks, right? Like I said,
That
I
was-
didn't watch the Thursday night game, so I don't know what fixed it, but I feel like it was just the Washington defense wasn't able to stop DJ Moore, and that was kind of a wrap for the game.
I would say that was kind of my impression as well. Although I will say Fields was throwing some dots in that game for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, they were money balls. Um, so just let's just put a pin in this, or I mean, wrap it really quick with Fields. You're not in on Fields. You think this
Uh,
resurgence is fake?
I would need to see. I first of all, I need to watch the Resurgence games to be able to really give you
Okay.
a true
Yeah.
opinion. But second of all, I do think it's probably more of a flash in the pan than anything, right? Like,
Okay.
I don't think it's something the Bears are going to be able to consistently do week after week, if that's the question. And I think if Fields has put it together as a quarterback, that's awesome. But I still don't think that supporting cast, even if Fields has put it together and all of a sudden he's like playing like a top 10 quarterback or whatever, right? I don't think that supporting cast is going to support an offense that does that week after week either.
Yeah. I will finish my thoughts on this by saying I'm not sticking my neck out for Justin Fields ever again. So let's just
Yeah.
move on. So we kind of talked about the offense there a bit.
Yeah, so I want
Have
to
you?
throw in one additional thing on the offense, right? Obviously, Khalil Herbert got hurt, so it's going to be the backups. I think they
Yeah.
have quality enough backups in Foreman and Roshan Johnson, who's been okay as a rookie, and
Yeah.
Fields' addition in the run game, that the run game should be solid. They've done some nice things in the quarterback run game so far this year. The one thing I will say with the Vikings defensive side of the ball, we are so aggressive and we blitz so much that I think it's going to cause problems for Fields, because Fields' problem was very slow processing when he was having
I'm
trouble
still.
early in the year. I can't say
I
whether that continued to the previous two games, but I have a bet that it did, and it just kind of happened on longer developing plays, which is what Fields has always been best at. So the Vikings have forced their opposing quarterbacks to make decisions extremely quickly throughout the course of every game, and a player like Justin Herbert did awesome at that in the Chargers game, right? He was getting the ball out in like 2.1 seconds. Mahomes is Mahomes. So he did that on some plays, and then he just ran around and did crazy scramble stuff on other plays. Fields might give you the crazy scramble stuff, but that doesn't guarantee that anybody is getting open on that Bears offense when they do scramble, and it doesn't guarantee. And I think Fields is going to hold on to the ball a tick too long and take a lot of sacks, right? Like Mahomes doesn't take sacks, and he took 2 sacks against the Vikings because they were pressuring him that effectively. Fields, who is notorious for taking a ton of sacks, I think he's going to be in a lot worse shape against this defense than Mahomes was.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was something I was thinking about and I just completely forgot to mention is the blitzing aspect and how Fields does seem to struggle with that. So we shall see. Defensively, do you have any thoughts on the Chicago defense? My impression of them is that they give up a lot of points very quickly,
Yeah, it's
and
no
that's
good, very bad. And it turns out we learned this on Christmas Day, one year against Alvin Kamara, that when you don't have an NFL caliber defensive line, you cannot stop anything at all, and you can't win a football game. Now, I guess the Bears have won a football game, so they might have proven that point wrong a little bit. But the Bears do not have an NFL caliber defensive line. It's like 2 third-round picks on the interior. Their edge rushers are complete nobodies that like you've never heard of if you want to go look it up. I think is DeMarcus Walker one of them, or did they get rid of DeMarcus Walker before the? No, they got rid of Tashawn Gibson. So DeMarcus Walker is one of
and I
them.
got no
DeMarcus
idea.
Walker is probably their best player on defense. So on the
I
defensive
know Eddie
line.
Jackson. That's all I
Right.
know.
So, the Bears fans were all excited this offseason. They spent all this money on these awful linebackers, and guess what? Tremaine Edmonds has been terrible in coverage so far this year, right? And they've been exploited in the run game, I think, on a pretty consistent basis. So I think the Vikings will be able to run the ball successfully in this game, and the Vikings have been very Jekyll and Hyde in the running game on offense. When they've had opposing defenses that have committed to stopping the run, that would be the Eagles and the Bucks. They were terrible, right? They were 31st, and I got the numbers on this. They were 32nd. They were dead last in EPA by like a lot. And I think some of the fumbles had something to do with that, but they were 29th in success rate. I don't have the numbers for this past week, but in weeks 3 to 4, they were 6th in EPA per play and 3rd in success rate on offense in the run game, because the Fangio style defenses of the Chargers and the Panthers just didn't care about stopping the run, and the Vikings were able to exploit that on the offensive side of the ball. Against the Chiefs, they were kind of middling. They averaged 3.8 yards per attempt, and they had few enough possessions and were kind of, trying to keep up with the Patrick Mahomes that they didn't run the ball all that much. I think this is a game where the Vikings will be able to run the ball if they want to, but also the Bears secondary has been very exploitable as well, right? So it's kind of one of those things where I hope that this is the Vikings ease into it kind of game without having Justin Jefferson, and they're able to get the passing game going. But if they need to lean on the running game more, and if they want to lean on the running game a little bit more because of the lack of Justin Jefferson in the offense, I think they're going to be able to do it successfully against the Bears.
You know how I feel about that. We need to run the ball. I need to see us follow through on all this chatter about committing to the run. This is the week to do it. You've got Justin sitting on the sideline. You've got a lot of question marks on how you're going to cover for that in the passing game. And like you said, the Bears are susceptible. Run the fucking ball. Let's go.
See,
Where's the deal?
I don't have a problem with the run pass ratio so far, and I don't have a problem with the way we've deployed the running game. I think it's actually been a great help for us to invest so much in the ability to run the football that we have done in terms of Josh Oliver and just, the intentions that the Vikings have put out there in the universe, because we've been incredibly efficient in the passing game. We've passed it a ton, but we've been incredibly efficient in it. I think if we don't have all of the turnovers on offense, which you can't just say, oh, this offense is going to be good if they don't turn the ball over, right? Because the Vikings have proven that they're going to turn the ball over. So yeah, the offense is probably going to suck until proven otherwise, because they can't stop turning the freaking ball over. But even including those turnovers, the Vikings convert 73% of their downs to another first down. That's ninth best in the league. They, in drive success rate, which is a Football Outsiders, not Football Outsiders anymore. Don't go to Football Outsiders. They're bad people who don't pay their writers. Aaron Schatz has it up, who's the founder of Football Outsiders, has it up at FTN Fantasy, I think is the website. I backdoored away to figure out their drive stats because the Vikings are the worst team in the NFL at fumbling the football. So I was able to sort it so they'd get to their column. They are, fifth in yards per drive on offense. They're 13th in points per drive because they keep turning the ball over. They're 7th in touchdowns per drive. They're 31st in field goals per drive. They don't have any field goals because they get to the red zone and they either score a touchdown or they turn the ball over. That's why they don't have field goals, right? So they're pretty effective at doing that. But importantly, drive success rate, which is very similar to that 73% metric I put up earlier. They are 0.726, which is pretty much in line, but that drive success that's 13th in the NFL. But that eliminates some like kneel downs or like end of game situations that I don't think the 73% does. So the numbers are a little bit different. The Vikings have an above average offense and would be a very good offense if they wouldn't turn the ball over like 24% of the time. I think the rate is 0.24 for turnovers. So I think that's 24% of their drives they've turned the ball over this year. And they have 50 drives. They have 11, 12 turnovers, something like that. So that kind of tracks just on mental math right there. So, I don't really have a problem with how they've run the football because they've been very successful in general as an offense, and they continue to move the chains, right? Okay. So the rushing attempts going up isn't something that matters to me all that much. The ability to move the chains is what matters to me, and having a running game that can be efficient and avoid negative plays is very important for moving the chains, right? Because you need to run the football for some capacity. But I think it's helped I think it's part of what's helped the Vikings be explosive on offense, the investment in the running game, because they're hitting downfield play action stuff, So okay. At the end of the day, I don't hate what we've done on offense. Now, maybe we lose Justin Jefferson and all of this changes, right? And everything falls apart. And the investments that they made in the offensive line, or not even in the offensive line, but in the run game and the offense don't matter when we don't have a game-changing running back, right? With kind of a pedestrian guy in Alex Madison. But yeah. I've been okay so far with assuming that Justin Jefferson is on the field. We'll have to see how it plays out without him.
Yeah, I think the bottom line in this game is going to be get in field space, mess them up, don't let them get comfortable,
Hmm.
and offensively just feel it out. Like you said this already. I think just not put a ton of pressure on ourselves on those first 3 or 4 drives because I think the Bears will let us stay in this game. Um, and then we can sort of sort it out by the fourth quarter, hopefully.
Hmm.
And frankly, I think we will beat the Bears. Let's give predictions though. What's your prediction? Victory by how much? Do you think this is a surprise loss? What's your deal?
I mean,
What do you
I
think?
don't think any result should be a surprise considering the loss of Justin Jefferson, right? When you lose a
Sure.
player who's that critical to the offense, it could just unravel, right? I think that the talent there is enough. Like, I went through a list of all the teams, like what their skill position talent would look like if they lost their best player, and I think the Vikings stacked up okay. Like, they clearly didn't stack up as one of the best teams, but they were probably around middle of the pack uh, without Justin Jefferson on the field, right? Uh, I think that they maybe have a better skill group than the Bears, who all they have is DJ Moore still on the field. They have a quarterback who is better than the Bears. They have an offensive line that's better than the Bears. So I think they're better than the Bears on offense. I also think they're probably better than the Bears on defense because they actually have guys who can play on the defensive line, right? We can stop the run in some capacity, and we can definitely get after the quarterback with Hunter and Davenport, right? We can't really get after it on the interior, but the Bears can't get off the quarterback at all. So, who
Right.
really cares at that point? Um, I think we're going to make it more like the Panthers game where it's going to be low scoring and both teams are probably going to want to run the ball a little bit more. So I'm going to go with a 20-13. We still can't get off the one score bug. I think that's probably the exact score from the Panthers game, Viking win.
Right on. I'm much in line with you. I think that the only two like major concerns I have about this game, obviously Justin Jefferson, um, not knowing we are entering uncharted waters there. No idea what it's going to look like. The players and the coaches can talk and talk and talk about, oh, we're going to be ready and all this stuff. You literally have never done it before, so you have no
Mm-hmm.
idea what it's going to be like. And sometimes that really shakes the team to its core. So that concerns me. And the other thing that concerns me is the long rest for the Bears, which I think is kind of an underrated part of this game, is that they've had they're going to have a lot of time off here, and
Mm-hmm.
if they found stuff that they liked in those last couple of games, they might try to do that more. It's just that makes me a little nervous too. They're them having more time to prepare, but um, I do think we win this game. I don't believe the Bears have enough talent to win much of anything this year, even without JJ. I think though that it'll be a very uncomfortable game. And I agree with you, it'll be low scoring, but I would go even lower. I would say it's one of those um, uncharacteristic in the modern game these days to see these kinds of scores. But I'm thinking a 17-13, a 14-10, just like an ugly, scratchy, clawy kind of game. It
Yeah,
feels like that.
you can absolutely see both sides having like two or three turnovers and then
Yeah.
just failing to do anything, like three and outs, all that sort of nonsense.
Yeah. Just
Um
ugly, ugly football. I feel like that's what we're in line for, honestly. Like it just feels like that kind of game to me.
and
But
it's
we
at
win.
Soldier Field. The Vikings are never good at Soldier Field. Like
Yeah.
it's
It's
just
just
going to I can definitely see it being one of those games where even if the Vikings win, you're tearing your hair out the whole time,
kind
right?
of like the Panthers game,
Yeah.
But I will say this, and I'd like to finish with this on my end. I do wonder if a loss to the Bears, you know, like living in that reality for a second, which I don't think we will, but I don't I don't know if our season can recover from that. I feel like this is a very, very, very big game in terms of what we have coming up. We need to position ourselves for the back half of this schedule because that's when things get a little quote unquote easier. We need this game. And it feels like a big one. Matt,
Yeah.
what would you like to leave the listeners with?
I guess that's a fair point. Like with the Justin Jefferson injury, like I've just kind of punted on the Vikings being able to make a comeback and like make the playoffs or something this season, right? Because I think it's kind of a pivotal thing. I think the there would be a path for them to be able to do that with a healthy Justin Jefferson. And maybe if they can get through this, because they're not strong opponents besides the 49ers in like the next 4 games. If they can get through that, they still have a shot to make a run at that. But if they lose this game to the Bears, like all that gets thrown out the window immediately to me. Like it's kind of over on the season, which sucks. It's so weird to have that level of whiplash from last year being 13-4. Right, but like sure. I don't think the hard thing is like this team's not all that much worse than the team that went 13-4 last year. It's just like literally, and you know, a lot of it's their own fault. Like I'm not trying to say like, oh, they're 1-4 because they have bad luck, but like every single bounce that went their way last year, every single slight margin advantage that the Vikings got last year has gone the exact opposite way that this past year. Right, yeah. Like that Justin Jefferson amazing 4th down Bills catch, that's happening on us this year, you know.
Well, like, I think that's what probably annoys you the most about pundits only talking about the 1-score game stat, because the 1-score game stat is very easy. We can all see that. It's very clear. Yeah. The issue is all the little details. We talked about, you know, situational moments. We're fucking all those up for some reason. We're turning the ball over. We didn't do that much last year. I mean, it seems like everything is going wrong. And Justin Jefferson getting hurt, just like that's just the cherry on top, man. Like that's the kind of thing that happens when you're having these kind of seasons. So we will certainly find out what kind of season we have in store against the Bears this week. Hopefully we leave with the W. Matt, any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
I'm really glad we went through this entire episode without talking about the reffing really in the Chiefs game at all, because that's a weak excuse for weak people, and you guys need to stop talking about it.
Stop it. It happens to every team every year. It's not even a thing. And except when we play the Packers.
Well, yeah. When we play the Packers, everything goes against the Packers. But no. Right. Let's get out of here.
Yeah, let's wrap this thing up. You can find Matt on Twitter at Bry's Football. You can find our other co-host, Nick Olson, who wasn't able to join us today, at Nick Olson NFL. You can find me on Instagram at You've Been Gregged with 3 G's. You can find us on Twitter as a show at Kindred Skulls. And you can also find us on YouTube by searching for the same. We're available everywhere you listen to pods. And thanks for being with us this week.
Yeah.
Skol Vikings.
Skol Vikings.
Skol, baby.
The first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind. And we'll score.